Thanks to NECA, the clown's coming back early. Here's your look at the NECA Toys It the Movie Ultimate Pennywise 2020 reissue. Seven friends engage in a struggle with a demon they first encountered 30 years earlier in their main hometown. Figure includes balloon, tentacle hand, monster hand, grabbing hands, book, and 3 new interchangeable heads. I really hope nobody suffers from color phobia. The idea of watching 2 clown reviews in 1 week might be a little unsettling. Just before, of course, we get a closer look at version 2 Pennywise, dated from 2020. This one's actually only a year later from the one that I first picked up in 2019. The tape measure is first going to tell us that the figure stands at 6.5 inches in height, or the figure's 17 centimeters tall. I've already told this story in the earlier review of Pennywise this week, but I had actually picked up this one and the other Pennywise during a time that I checked out a off-the-beaten-path comic book store I only go there like once a month to. It just so happened to be the case that they every once in a while sell stuff off that they just can't get rid of. And it happened to be the case, coincidentally. I walked into the store and they were marking down a lot of their NECA figures. Well, I picked up this one for $10, if you could believe it. I picked up the earlier Pennywise we've already had a look at, also for $10. They had also marked down a couple of other ones there as well, but having looked at the lots, I mean, there were figures I already had in my collection, even though they were like $25. They were half the asking price of what normal figures would go for. I just didn't want to spend the money I didn't need to spend. So I did pick up this one, and I did, like I said, pick up the other Pennywise. Now, this one isn't as big of a gap from the other earlier Pennywise. The one that we had already looked at earlier in this week, if you've been following the exploits here on this channel, was a gapped space of 3 years. The first one was 2018. This was 2021. I made a big thing about 3, 3, and 3 in that review. It was hilarious. You got to check it out. Whereas this one actually is dated 2020. The one that I looked at before was 2019. So it's only a difference of a year. I don't know if you can see what a year's difference would have made. You can see that some of the color schemes are a little bit different on the yellows, for example, and the heads are slightly varied. Not as maybe varied as the one that was the 3-year gap, but they're slightly different from one another. As I run through all the accessories that get collected with this clown, I'll bring in the ones that came included with the 2019 release so you can see the differences between the two. First things first, the figure comes included with the balloon. Now, the balloon is a little bit different from the balloons we got from before in that this one actually does say turn back now. If there's an evil clown looking at me and he's holding a balloon that says turn back now, you bet your bottom dollar I'll be turning back right now. The balloon that we did get from before, if you're looking at the difference between the two, I can't help but notice that this one looks a little bit more opaque. This one has slightly more of a translucency to it, and it's a lot brighter of a yellow as well. Now, you could prefer this one, but I think actually I like this one because the font also stands out a little bit more. They're still difficult, though, to get inside his hands. He does actually come with one gripping hand for specifically holding the balloon. I couldn't help but notice that when it came to mine, that there was a little bit of plastic still over top of the hole, and I had to take myself a very fine screwdriver and just dowel out the hole a little bit more so that it would accommodate the balloon. It still struggles to get in there, though, and especially if you have slippery fingers like I just happen to have right now. It's not, like I said, the easiest thing to get in his hand, but he does hold it. It's just, it takes a lot of wiggling and convincing to get it all the way in there. I did show you what that looked at in the beginning of the review. The figure also comes included with an interchangeable hand, again, nicely painted here in white plastic, nicely painted over top of white plastic. And the figure also comes included with a monster hand. We will be changing out hands shortly in a moment. You can see the way that they've actually severed the fingers of the glove off so you can see the exposed monster fingers underneath with very long looking nails. Nice looking hands. By the way, though, we can bring in the original hand so you guys can see. A little bit whiter on this one. Even then, just to say white, it doesn't look like it's a solid white either. It looks like it's a slightly off color, but certainly not as off of a color as the original one. This one is kind of got a little bit more of a bluish tint or a greenish tint to it. This one looks a little bit more white by comparisons. We can also change out the hands, like I'll do that more in a second. The figure also comes included with a torn part of his sleeve. Now, the torn part of his sleeve goes better than with the larger monster hand. This basically will just go over top of the cuff of his existing forearm, and then you just put the monster hand over top of this. I know I'm just saying things right now. I need to be doing things. We'll be doing things more, like I said, in a moment. Bringing in the larger monster hand, you guys can see, this one is definitely shinier. As you can see, it seems to have more of a kind of gloss finish over top of it. This one definitely was more of like a matte finish. The details, I think, stand out a lot more on the one that was a year difference. So again, there's some changes that have been made to the better. I mean, so far, For what I've seen, other than one thing, I feel like some of the changes are worth picking up the figure, even if you already have the original lot number from before. The figure also comes included with a pretty cool looking 3D photo album. The photo album, just to bring back in the original one here so you guys can see. To look at one and then look at the other, I would be hard pressed to kind of see the difference and be able to say, okay, well, this one was one that was a year later. This one was from 2019. I mean, that would be crazy. You guys would just think I'm fibbing you guys. But like the photo looks almost exactly the same. I mean, maybe he looks a little clearer here in the image here. The hands look to be exactly the same also as well. Not really a lot of differences between those. And then the figure, like I said, also comes included with some interchangeable heads. The good thing about the heads is not only can you change them out with the existing Pennywise version 2 that we're looking at in this review, but those same heads also, if you happen to have the earlier Pennywise, has the same universally sized ball joint holes. So again, you can just mix and match the heads if you really wanted to. The first head that we'll look at, do you want to look at this head first? Okay, the first head that we'll look at happens to be the one that's already attached onto his body. Now, this one actually helps because I happen to have the original Pennywise still with that same head sculpt in place. Once again, like the hair is a lot more brighter on the 2019 release and isn't as bright on the 2020 release. So there's some color changes there. The face is also notably whiter here on the first one that we looked at versus the newer one. This one has almost like a little bit more of a bluish tint to it. The eyes are also a little bit more defined. So really, even though this was a case where the accessories may have looked better on the newer release, I happen to think like the head sculpts look better on the 2019 version. By the way, also the heads, like I said, we'll just put this figure down here for a second, comes with a couple of other additional heads. He's got the screaming head sculpt, which again, we'll just bring back in the original one. I couldn't help but think like the expression looks a little bit more vibrant on this version than it does on this one here. I'm not sure really what it is that's doing it for me. I mean, it looks to, for all intents and purposes, other than really the hair being brighter, that the mouths are painted the same. The eyes look to be painted the same as well. And yet this one seems to pop a little bit more. Maybe it again has something to do with the way they painted the white. Although the white looks notably brighter here on this one than it does on this one here. I mean, looking at the two, they're obviously the exact same sculpt, but I don't know what it is. I seem more drawn to this one, the one from 2019. And again, you can just change these heads if you want to. This one also has this head sculpt, which I really like this one and might be more inclined to change this one out with the original Pennywise and just pop it out and replace it with that one. So if you wanted to, it's just a case of removing the head on the original Pennywise. Wasn't really expecting to do this. And then just replace it out with the one from version 2 and just pops in place. Because I didn't prep this in advance with heating this would basically just sit over top of the ball joint, and then you could just use it with the original Pennywise. They also did something very similar to the Skarsgård version of Pennywise, where any one of the heads we got from other releases of Pennywise could then just be mixed and matched. So you really could come up with a perfect Pennywise. And just to bring back in the one from 2019, would you see there's a difference? I feel there's a difference. Like there's a slightly darker coloring around his eyes. Maybe it's the blue that's doing it. The panel lining seems a little more profound, I think, on this one than it does on this one here. I don't know what it is. It just seems like all the older heads seem to do a better job of giving us a more defined face sculpt, whereas this one doesn't feel like it has as much going for it. Again, like the coloring of the hair, definitely a lot brighter and redder on this one. I just feel like, again, like the 2019 head sculpt so far seems superior. Maybe that might also change also when we look at this head sculpt, which again is just the screaming face. Did we already do this one? I think we already did do this one. Changing out the heads, by the way, is just as complicated as the one before. Unfortunately, it's relying on ball joints. So again, you're popping off the head from provided peg. If you're having any hard time doing this, by the way, I still kind of wish in a way that we'll talk more about that in a moment. I still wish that they could have, in doing the reissues, I know obviously they're just going to be using the same bodies, that they really would switch instead to posts. Posts instead of ball joints. Posts work so much easier. But the ball joints are something that's just going to cause more problems. I mean, especially when you're trying to get the figure's head sculpts in place. Like if you wanted to say, for example, let's take this head sculpt here and pop it in place. It's just a case, again, of fitting over top of the ball joint and putting pressure down. One thing, unfortunately, though, on mine, you probably have already noticed for yourself, is that there was a staining here. And that's probably something because of, obviously, the fact that his hair is sitting so close to the collar and the collar being white. It wasn't so much the case on the other one, but I couldn't help but notice the moment I first removed the head, there was all this unfortunate, very unsightly looking red staining all across the top of the collar. It's just one of those unavoidable situations. Obviously, I'm not going to see it from the front. Obviously, I'm not even going to see it until I start to take the head off, but there's a stain that's very much obviously developed there on the top of the collar. Just a real bit of a shame. So moving all the heads out of the way, let's get a closer look at the bodies, and we'll compare both back to back, side to side. One thing I will say, though, is while looking at the metallic, I mean, the finish on the arms, the striping seems about the same. I don't think there's really much difference. I mean, one thing that's also different is the way that the vest on this one definitely looks a little more busier, and it doesn't look as busy on the 2019 release. Pom-poms look about the same, but the thing I'm drawing the most away from this when I'm taking this, whatever I take away from this figure, is the fact that if you're looking at the yellows, for example, see how they have brushed on this kind of darker, warmer yellow on some of the creased areas. The newer Pennywise, again, only a difference by a year. Even though the yellow is lighter, it doesn't have, again, like those additional washes over top of it. That by looking at the two, the older Pennywise actually does a better job of the costuming just because it has all this additional warmer yellow to it. I wish that this one would have had some of that because, again, like if you're looking at it, it's just enough just to bring a little bit more character to it, especially when you're looking at it from the back. You can see it's a lot lighter of a yellow. Just with, again, like the wash that they've added over top of it. I just think that the yellow part of his suit looks a little bit nicer. And again, if you did want to change out the hands, I know earlier we were talking about the hands. I didn't get the chance to really show you guys. If you want to change out to the monster hand, just a case of popping off the hand here, for example, you're going to want to put on the ripped sleeve. And I want to make sure I've got this facing the right way. And then you're going to want to take yourself the monster hand, and then the monster hand fits inside that provided hole. And the ripped sleeve basically just gives it a look so like the sleeve looks like it's been ripped open as he, of course, extends out his now monster-looking hand. Looks really nice. Now that I actually have myself two versions of version 2 Pennywise, might find myself displaying the figure with one of the hands like this, and then just displaying the other one with his regular clown hands. The articulation on this guy is going to be exactly the same as the version 2, and also will be exactly the same as the version 1 Pennywise. It's going to be on a ball joint, so it's going to rotate back and forth. What I'm doing right now certainly won't help with the staining on the back of the collar. I'm sure as I'm moving this back and forth, I'm scraping the paint onto the collar. But again, from the front, I'm never going to notice it's there. And probably the moment I put this guy on the shelf, I'm going to completely forget it was even there in the first place. The head looks up and looks down, but the problem with doing that is every once in a while you'll find the head will pop off the ball joint. You just have to put it back down in place. Arms rotate all the way around. That's the same on this side also as well. The arms come out at 90 degrees, or a little less than 90 degrees. Double hinge on the elbow. And even though I've swapped out the hands still rotate all the way around. The upper torso is going to be on a ball joint. It's a little harder to kind of move things around, especially it starts to scrape this part of the pom-pom. Luckily, none of the paint has scraped off on this version of Pennywise or the other ones we've looked at here earlier. When it comes to the legs, once again, you've got this little flap of plastic that's not only on the front, but also on the back as well. They've done it to sort of give you the illusion that the middle section of the clown outfit actually connects in the middle, but it doesn't. So when you are moving the legs around, for example, you'll notice that this little flap starts to lift up. The legs, by the way, also as well split out. They're on ball joints after all. There's a swivel at the top of the cut of the thigh, a single hinge only on the knee, allows the lower leg to rotate. And also with the legs, they are on ratchet joints, so not only can you move them up and down, or hinge joints, I should say, move up and down, and you can also rock them back and forth as well. One thing I did notice, though, about the version 2 Pennywise, I don't know if I even said that when the first time we looked at this figure, was I find that he has a little more of a harder time to stand. It wasn't the case with the version 1 Pennywise. Certainly wasn't also the case when we looked at the reissue version of Pennywise, which is just unfortunately missing his head. Let's get his head back in place. Yeah, by the way, as well, this guy does also have stain too. So I can't just say it's the reissue that suffers from that. It's basically every Pennywise. Just because Pennywise does have the red clown hair on the top, it's just going to mean that it's going to carry some of that also over to the white collar. But here's again, like the reissue Pennywise, this was what, from 2021, a difference of 3 years, 3, 3, and 3. This is the version 2 Pennywise from 2020, and then, 2020, and then this one here was 2019. So again, there's only a difference of a year. Now, within that year, some changes are made. I wouldn't necessarily say the sleeves, but I feel like, again, like the heads are a little bit better, I feel, still on the 2019 release. And also, I feel like the costuming, which again, like if you're looking at the yellows, when you compare the yellows with the yellow that we get here on the 2020 release of Pennywise, I just think like the warmer colors that they've washed on top of the yellow just makes the figure stand out that much more. Now, generally, when it comes to picking up reissues, like I said, the first thing I always do when it comes to checking at local stores is checking out the lot number. The last 2 digits will always tell you the year of production of that figure. And if I already know that the figure is only about a year difference, a lot of times I just don't pick it up. Every once in a while, though, you do find the rare gem like the 2018 Michael Myers reissue figure had a completely different head sculpt from the one that they released before. But when it comes to just paint, cosmetic changes, a year's difference doesn't really make a lot of changes. So usually a lot of times I may not pick up a figure if it's only a year difference between the two. It just so happened to be the case that I picked up this figure for $10. And actually, I picked up this figure second. The version 1 Pennywise, that was a difference of 3 years, I already had in my hand because I knew there was a difference of at least 2 years. I wasn't quite sure what the original one was in my collection. A lot of times, to be honest, I just go back and check my reviews of it and kind of get an idea. Okay, if I did the review in 2018, likelihood is I probably picked up the figure in that same year. Sometimes I do that as a little bit of researching when I go to local stores. I check kind of like the date of my review to kind of give an idea. Okay, when one roughly was the lot number for that figure. Picked up the version 1 Pennywise. I just happened to look over as well, and just right next to that was the version 2. Picked up the lot number, and again, kind of did a little bit of researching. I looked on the channel. Okay, well, this one came out 2019. This is 2020. Is there going to be a lot of a difference? There really isn't as much of a difference on this one as there was on the version 1. Still, I picked it up for $10. I'd be a fool to put it back down on the shelf. Now, again, looking at them as I did in this review, I mean, you could nickel and dime and look at all the details and say, okay, well, this one has slightly nicer eyes. Is that enough to really justify picking up a figure? Still, for $10, I would say yes, because even if the differences aren't as noticeable as the version 1 Pennywise we looked at earlier on this week, at least with the head sculpts that you get, having a second body of Pennywise can't be a bad thing at all for a collection, because with having extra heads to work with, even if you do get heads that look roughly the same with one another, you can easily then just mix and match them and have more than one Pennywise on the shelf. Ultimately, for $20, I now have the option of having 4 Tim Curry Pennywises on the shelf instead of just the 2 I had before. What do you guys think of the figure? Let me know down below in the comments section. And again, have you guys ever picked up a reissue figure? And are you like me that always checks the lot numbers on the bottom of the barcode? Like I said, it's always the last two digits. That'll tell you the year. If you guys did enjoy this video, I want to throw it a like. If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing and certainly do want to stick around for more, we may not be looking at any more reissue clowns. No, sorry. But we will be looking at some more NECA reviews. Yeah, that's always coming your way. So making sure you're hitting that subscribe, making sure turning on the bell notification. And then the most important thing is that you're coming back here on a regular basis. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.